Welcome to Life Stories, where we share real, heartfelt journeys of transformation and resilience. In today's story, we follow a woman who spent decades trapped in a life of self-sacrifice, feeling invisible and unappreciated by those she loved most. But everything changes when she decides to walk away, reclaim her independence, and start over. This is a tale of rediscovery, empowerment, and the courage to live for yourself. No matter your age, stay tuned and subscribe to the channel to begin today's story with us. Let's dive into the life-changing journey together. When I look back on my life, it feels as though I've been drowning in a sea of neglect. My name is Susan, and for years, I lived in a house that suffocated me in ways I never could have imagined. At first glance, everything seemed normal, maybe even enviable. I had a husband, John, a son, Michael, and a daughter-in-law, Sarah, and of course, there was my grandson, Alex. I thought that the love of my family would be enough to carry me through the trials of life. But it was never what I hoped it would be. My marriage to John was never perfect. But I did my best. I sacrificed everything for him and for our son, working tirelessly to keep the house in order, to provide for them, to raise Michael into the man he would eventually become. John, a man once full of ambition, became more withdrawn as the years went by. He stopped being the partner I had hoped for and transformed into a man who was rarely home and, when he was distant and uninterested in anything but his own hobbies. Dance classes, going out with friends. These were things he enjoyed while I was left to shoulder the burden of the house, the finances, and the emotional labor of our family. It wasn't just John. Michael, now an adult, seemed to think that my life was one of endless service. He criticized everything I did, from the way I cooked to how I cleaned. I had worked for him all his life, pouring my heart into his upbringing. But when he became a father, it felt as though he forgot the sacrifices I had made. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, seemed to view me as little more than a free babysitter for Alex. I didn't mind looking after him, of course. But it was the expectation that I would always be there, without a word of gratitude. That stung. And then there was Alex, my own grandson, a child who, despite my best efforts, looked at me with contempt rather than love. His indifference to me felt like the final blow. In my own home, I was invisible, nothing more than a servant to be taken for granted. I could feel it every day, the weight of being unappreciated. The constant nagging of voices that never saw me, never cared to understand what I was feeling. My knees hurt from years of running errands, picking up after everyone, and running the household without any help. My spirit was slowly withering under the unrelenting pressure of their demands. But I endured. I always endured, because that was what I was taught to do. In my family, endurance was a virtue. You did not question your role as a caretaker. You did not stop. You just kept going, even when you were broken. One afternoon, everything came crashing down. It happened when I was on my way to pick up Alex. The elevator I was in malfunctioned. The familiar hum of the metal doors, the clank of the cables, the sudden violent jolt as the elevator plummeted. Everything about that moment filled me with dread. I thought I was going to die. I could barely breathe, my heart hammering in my chest. My body was trembling with fear, my mind racing to grasp the reality of what was happening. But it wasn't the fear of death that strangled me. It was the suffocating realization that I was utterly alone in this. Not a single person in my family would care. As the elevator swayed dangerously, I managed to call John. The moment the phone connected, I wanted him to comfort me, to reassure me that everything would be okay. But his response was cold. Dismissive. I'm in the middle of a dance. I don't have time for this. He hung up before I could even speak. I dialed Michael next, desperation clawing at my throat. But his response was worse. You're completely useless, he said, his words a sharp slap. And then the line went dead. In that moment, I realized something that hit me harder than any fall or injury ever could. I was nothing in this house. To John, to Michael, to Sarah, I was just a body that existed to serve, to cook, to clean, to take care of things. They would never understand what I had given up, what I had sacrificed. They would never care. But that was the moment I knew. I was done. The pain, the exhaustion, the years of silence, it all built up inside me. A wave that had finally reached its peak. For the first time in my life, I was going to stand up for myself. No longer would I be their invisible servant. No longer would I stay and let them walk all over me. It was time to take control of my life. As the elevator finally came to a stop and I stumbled out, my body weak and shaking, I realized that I wasn't just walking out of the elevator. I was walking away from a life I had outgrown. I had been given the chance to live, to truly live, for the first time in years. I wasn't sure how everything would unfold, but I knew one thing. I would no longer be invisible. I would no longer be the martyr in the shadows. I was done. I remember every detail of that elevator ride as if it happened yesterday. The deafening clang of the cables. The sudden drop that sent me crashing to the floor. My heart leaping into my throat. I was trapped in a small metal box, suspended in mid-air, and for the first time in years, I felt completely vulnerable. The panic surged through me, sharp and unrelenting, gnawing at my insides like a hungry beast. But what suffocated me the most wasn't the confined space. It wasn't even the fear of death, though that had gripped me tightly. No, what truly suffocated me was the realization that in this moment, I was utterly alone. I wasn't just alone in the elevator. I was alone in my own life. As I clung to the railing, I thought of how many times I had reached out for help over the years, only to be ignored or dismissed. When the elevator jolted again, I pulled out my phone, hoping to at least hear a familiar voice, to feel like someone cared. I called John first. He was supposed to be my partner, my support. The call connected, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I might hear concern in his voice. But instead, his irritated tone cut through the static. "What now?" he snapped. "I'm in the middle of a dance. I don't have time for this." The words hit me like a slap to the face. He didn't even ask if I was okay. Didn't care that I was trapped and terrified. My breath caught in my throat as he hung up without another word. A coldness spread through me, deeper than any physical pain I had ever felt. My husband, the man I had dedicated my life to, couldn't even offer me a shred of sympathy. And just like that, I realized that I was invisible to him. I had always been invisible. Just a shadow moving through his world. Unimportant and easily forgotten. I dialed Michael next. My son. Surely he would understand, right? Surely he would offer some comfort. But when the call connected, his words were even colder. "You're completely useless," he said, before the line went dead. His voice echoed in my mind, each word a dagger that sank deep into my heart. Useless. It was the word I had heard from them both, over and over again. Useless for not meeting their expectations. Useless for not being perfect. Useless for being tired, for being human. As I sat there, trapped between the walls of the elevator, I understood something that I had never fully grasped before. I was nothing in this family. To John, to Michael, I was just a convenience. A body that cooked and cleaned and picked up the pieces when they needed it. But I was not seen. I was not valued. I had spent so much of my life sacrificing for them. And yet, when I needed them, when I was at my most vulnerable, they couldn't even offer me a simple word of reassurance. The young woman beside me, trembling with fear, was in a similar situation. She called her boyfriend, and at first, he tried to comfort her. But as time dragged on, his patience wore thin. "Babe, I've got work to do," he said. "I need to submit a report before the deadline." "Don't worry, just wait for the rescue team." She was left in silence as he hung up, and I could see the heartbreak in her eyes. For a brief moment, I saw myself in her, the young woman, full of hope, only to be let down by those she trusted. I had been there before. John had hung up on me countless times. The same words, the same dismissal. "What do you want?" he would ask before hanging up before I could even speak. I had begged for help so many times, but there was never any concern. No understanding. just frustration. This time, however, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to let this be the moment where I broke down. I wasn't going to let them win. Let them strip me of my dignity once and for all. I didn't care if they never understood. I didn't care if they never apologized. What mattered now was that I was alive. And I was going to take back my life. The elevator finally came to a stop. And rescue workers arrived to pull us out. As I limped away, the weight of everything I had just experienced settled on my shoulders. But this time, it didn't crush me, it empowered me. For the first time in years, I had an awakening. I didn't need them to save me. I was capable of saving myself. I climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator, my injured leg protesting with every step. By the time I reached my apartment, I was exhausted, drained, and in pain, but something had changed inside me. As I opened the door, I knew I wasn't going to be the same person who had walked into that elevator earlier that day. I was done. I was done being invisible. Done being their servant. Done being the one who took all the blame, all the criticism, all the neglect. I was going to walk away. And no one was going to stop me. I had finally done it. I had walked away. The decision to leave was not easy. And the steps I took were shaky at best. But once I made up my mind, I never looked back. That evening, when I closed the door behind me, I didn't just leave a house, I left a life. One that had held me captive for far too long. It wasn't just about a divorce, it was about reclaiming my life. About finding my own path after years of being lost in the roles others had forced upon me. The first night I spent alone in the small apartment I rented was unsettling. But also strangely liberating. The silence was deafening, but it was the first time in years that I could hear my own thoughts without the constant distractions of my family's demands. I could breathe without feeling guilty. I could think without wondering how I was going to make everyone else's life easier while mine fell apart. The days that followed were filled with newness and change. Things I hadn't felt in such a long time. I moved in slowly, piece by piece, adjusting to the freedom I had never known. I unpacked my belongings, each item a small reminder of my past life, some painful, some forgotten, but all of them a part of me. My old home, the one that had once felt like a fortress, now seemed distant and foreign. I realized I had spent so much time trying to hold it all together that I had forgotten how to hold myself. I found a sense of peace in the mundane. I cooked for myself for the first time in years. Not out of obligation but because I wanted to. There was something beautiful in chopping vegetables, stirring a pot, and setting the table for one. It wasn't lonely, it was freeing. I had spent so long in a household where no one appreciated anything I did, where my efforts were constantly overlooked. Now, every meal I prepared felt like an act of self-care. For the first time in ages, I was taking care of myself in a way that mattered. One evening, while I was cleaning the house, I received a call from Linda, a longtime friend of mine who had always been the kind of person to speak her mind. She had heard about my divorce and was full of ideas. "You're amazing at cooking, Susie," she said with enthusiasm. "Why don't we start a food channel? We could film your recipes, share them online. I'll handle everything else." I hesitated at first, unsure of myself. Starting a food channel? I had never considered such a thing. But Linda was convincing. Her voice was full of energy and excitement. And I found myself warming to the idea. What did I have to lose? For so long, I had lived to please everyone else. And here was an opportunity to do something for myself. To build something that was truly mine. So, we started the channel. Linda took charge of the technical side, editing, uploading, and marketing, while I focused on cooking and sharing my recipes. It felt incredible to do something that was all mine. Every video we posted was a step forward. A testament to my ability to create something from scratch. Something that was valuable. Something that mattered. Over time, our channel began to gain traction. People started watching, sharing, and commenting. It felt like a dream come true, especially when we received our first paid sponsorship. The excitement I felt in that moment was overwhelming. I had always believed I was incapable of earning money on my own. That my value was tied solely to my family's needs. But now, here I was, making money doing something I loved. As our channel grew, so did my confidence. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive. I was no longer defined by the expectations of my family, the judgments of my husband or son. I was not just a caretaker, not just someone who cooked and cleaned. I was a person with dreams, with ambition, with a future. But the most important lesson I learned in those early days of freedom was this: it was never too late to start over. At 60, I thought my life was finished, that my best years had passed me by. But as I stood there, watching our videos gain more and more views, I realized that life didn't end when you hit a certain age. It didn't end when you left a toxic marriage, or when your children turned their backs on you. It only ended when you stopped trying. So, with each new day, I grew more confident in my choices, more secure in my own worth. I had broken free, and I was finally beginning to live for myself. As time passed, I found myself standing on the edge of a new chapter, one I never could have imagined when I first walked away from that suffocating life. I had transformed, not just in the way I lived, but in the way I saw myself. The woman who had once been invisible, who had lived only for others, had found her voice, her strength, and her purpose. I was no longer defined by my past, by the roles others had imposed on me. I had become someone entirely new, someone who could stand on her own 2 feet and build her own future. The food channel that Linda and I started became more than just a success. It became a symbol of my freedom, my resilience. With every recipe shared, every video posted, I was telling my story, my truth. It wasn't just about cooking, it was about reclaiming my life. Showing others that it's never too late to start over, no matter your age or the obstacles you face. People from all walks of life reached out, sharing their own stories of struggle and triumph. And it felt like I was part of something bigger, a community of people who had fought their own battles and come out stronger. One evening, as I sat down to film another video, I paused for a moment, reflecting on how far I had come. I smiled, grateful for the life I was building, and thought of the lessons I had learned, that the past does not define us, that we are never too old to begin again, and that true happiness comes when we finally choose ourselves. If you enjoyed my story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and follow along for more videos from life stories. Thank you for being a part of this journey with me. The best is yet to come.